I want to verify that we have the recording. All right, everybody, please mute yourselves, turn off your microphones. And make sure that those are taken care of. And we have a confirmation from the Access team. This is good news. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for tonight's SBSLI board meeting. We will be first approving the agenda as was posted. It has been sent out in advance of this meeting. We'll do a quick review, or has the board had time to review, rather?
Correct.
And
We
if
have.
so, perfect. Can I get a motion?
This is Sue. I move to approve the agenda as written. And this is Leslie. I second.
Great. No discussion, so we can move forward with some support in favor. All right, the motion passes with unanimous consent. All right. We do feel like it's important to discuss a few things in regards to the interpreter educational provisional licensure. But we do have three items that we'd like to focus on: fully licensed interpreters, provisionally licensed interpreters, and the educational provisional licensed interpreters. So for the fully licensed interpreters, this is an individual who is certified, has their certification, be it national or regional certification. The provisional general licensed interpreter will be focusing on the knowledge and ethics written test of CASLI for their attainment of said provisional license. And for the educational license, the provisional license will be the written test and an EIPA score of 3.7. Those are the three licenses and corresponding requirements. We've had a lot of discussion. In the first general license, this is an individual who can interpret in any setting, whereas the educational provisional license can only work within the educational field. When it comes to the general license, provisional license rather, we had a lot of discussion on where they would be allowed to work. As it stands, they cannot work in a legal setting at all. And for behavioral health or medical, they may work with a licensed team. In discussion of educational setting, to allow provisionally licensed interpreters to work in that setting, we are, I'm sorry. And we'll be discussing tonight whether or not to allow those general provisional licensed interpreters. I had to clarify from the Access team. So we'll be going through with that and then hopefully make an announcement. Tonight, we have to start with an announcement of our board member, Paige Franklin, has resigned from their position. We'd like to thank her for her service and diligence in the work of the board, providing feedback and thoughtful insights to us. It has been invaluable as a contribution for the board's work. So we want to thank you for all of her time and contribution. So thank you, Paige, for serving on the board for as long as you did. We are hoping to have more board members join us soon. Now, Director of the Governor's Office of Devon Harvey Hearing, Director DeBerry, would like to share a few words, so I'd like to call her to the floor for her remarks.
Can everybody see me? Good evening, our beautiful board. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make a few brief comments. I would like to take this opportunity to share with everybody watching my deepest and profound apologies for last week and the technical difficulties we experienced. I want everybody to know that our office and myself as the director will continue to support as much as possible this board. We are committed to continuing doing that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director DeBerry, for all the support that your office has provided to us in our endeavor to post regulations, change regulations, et cetera, and get them to the finish line. We have also want to thank our Assistant Attorney General, Ethan Sonnenstrahl, for his efforts as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good meeting.
All right, so we'd like to open with some comments from the chair and remind everybody that our board is responsible for the licensure of interpreters in the state of Maryland? What qualifies an individual to obtain a license? Our job is not about providing feedback to interpreters. It is solely focused on licensure and creating a set of standards from which interpreters will operate within the state of Maryland. We've gotten a lot of emails from the community, a lot of feedback, and a lot of comments from interpreters, parents, the deaf community, ITP programs, etc. And we've been inundated with those comments and feedback. And they are crucial and invaluable to our work as a board. Some have been sent to me, some have been sent to the board members. We have shared all comments with each other and reviewed all of them as we have received them, be they via letter, email, or whatever other mechanism. Thank you to the community for all your feedback. We're thrilled to see how much that the community wants to be involved in this work in supporting the field and our constituency group. So,
Who would like to start based on what we've learned? Sue, you want to kick us off? Sure. Thank you, Chair Leffler. We received a lot of feedback from the community and some organizations as well as it relates to specifically the CASLI written exam. I took the opportunity again to review the content of the CASLI test, CASLI, and upon reviewing it and looking to their guidance, I noticed that many of what they call domains within the test, I use pretty much on a daily basis in my work in the classroom. That being said, okay, it's not a complete diagnostic of production and sign language skill, but from that explanation, it does state the term bilingual, some ASL and some English, and the ethical component is mostly in ASL from, again, what I read about the exam. So it still requires some level of receptive or understanding of sign language in terms of skill set. And I think, that is one of the most important pieces of sign language. You can learn the production, the expressive skill, but it is equally as important to be able to understand the language. If that doesn't happen, and an interpreter doesn't understand the client, then really what is the point? There are many interpreters who are historically weak and struggle with the receptive piece of interpreting. That's just my opinion.
thank you, Member Beaver. Leslie, Vice Chair, would you like to make some comments?
Certainly. This is Leslie speaking. We've asked people to reach out to us via email, and we thank them for the emails and the feedback we've gotten. Okay. I've gotten a lot of contact from several people, and what we've seen and what we've heard, I myself want to make sure that all the information is provided and that what was said and what is being said is accurate. Okay. Pretty much all of what I said last week was accurate. I reached out to over 15 different people who have taken the ethical exam within the last 2 years, and every single one of them emphatically said that the questions themselves are signed and written in English. In addition to that, all of the signed questions you can repeat. You can play that recording over and over again, which means it doesn't necessarily require an individual to understand that at first blush. They can play it several times to understand the question. In addition to that, if a person doesn't fully comprehend the question in sign language, they will see this question again in printed English, and they have the opportunity in the test, not when you submit the answer. Once that happens, it's done. But before that, you have the ability to move forward and backward and navigate within the test. I did reach out to some people, and they agreed that there was a level of receptive skill required, but they said it was intermediate at best. And again, there's no production at all. And there are no questions related to the actual act, the skill, the craft of interpreting. There were some questions on the exam about, for example, how to navigate the work within the interpreting field. Like, for example, what scheduling may or may not look like, when a deaf-blind interpreter is needed, how to identify those types of scenarios, so forth and so on. But again, I also had the opportunity to read and review the CASLI Knowledge Ethical Exam, the outline that they provide. And from what I have heard, again, from the community, historically speaking, for the last 3 years, okay, back when the bill was originally drafted, people have said not all of what is advertised is necessarily all accurate when it comes to the test. What they post is great, but that's not necessarily what is reflected in the content of the test. And I think, again, what's important, and the reason why I polled people about this, people who are already certified and who have the NIC, is even though this is new and this is a change, I, for example, I cannot speak from experience. I can speak from data collection because I cannot take the test having been certified. And again, it's still third person knowledge and third person learning, and I recognize that. That being said, the people who I did reach out to, I trust. Okay, because I don't want to talk to somebody who's taken the test several years ago. I want somebody who's has taken it recently. And I also received several emails from parents as part of the feedback I collected. And they expressed concerns about language access for their children. And I agree, it's a lot of responsibility on the part of the parents and on the part of the school system. I want to go back to when we think about even a 2-year-old or an early elementary age student, 2, 3, 4, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, these children having access to educational services in their local school system. Okay, we're not only talking kindergarten above, K-12, we're also talking about those pre-K students. So expecting hearing parents who maybe are learning the language themselves to assess the language of the interpreter in front of their 3-year-old is difficult. Okay, and that's why our job is so mission critical. The task of the board, our responsibility is to protect, via this bill and this law, the consumer. It is a Consumer Protection Act at its heart, at its foundation. And how do I say? I feel strongly, based on what I've collected and based on my opinion and my seat on the board, okay, is as a community member, and many parents of deaf children have reached out repeatedly, okay? These are not the only people who have contacted me directly, and I have to go along with what they're asking and what their ask is, and it's for protection for their children. So just trying to share a little bit about what I've done in terms of curating feedback on what we talked about last week. And I think it's very important to recognize that it's not just a matter of, making sure that people know we haven't, done nothing. There has been forward momentum.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And also, we have seen from some of the community members support for the CASLI qualified interpreters via that test in education, and some are opposed to it. That's not really surprising. I know there are cornucopia of various perspectives on this issue, and we're not going to reach full consensus. Speaking as a person myself, when I'm thinking about deaf students' access to education, their school settings, and exposure to language, primarily that's via an interpreter. That tends to be where most students in an educational setting get their language exposure, meaning that those students have to rely on those interpreters for acquiring information and knowledge. We should have high standards and expectations of those interpreters to make sure that those settings are fully accessible linguistically as well as informationally for our students, meaning that they're highly qualified for interpreting the information as well as within those settings as language models. Now, again, there are some interpreters that may not be giving full access because of their signability. And again, if we're looking at 5 years from which somebody could enter not having the skills and then developing those skills, 5 years is, again, kindergarten through 5th grade. That's a significant portion of a student's educational journey. It is important for the interpreters to also make sure that they are adjusting their language for the individuals they are working with. With adults, we have the ability to do that as deaf individuals, to code switch for typical parlance, that we can work with a number of different interpreters. And that's not always a skill set that's available to children. but we come at this with a fully developed language in place already. For the deaf community as well, a lot of their comments, parents do not necessarily understand signing when they first have their deaf child brought to them. This is not something that they are absent in the journey of their language development. So this is something that parents themselves are learning. If you're looking at rural areas, whether it's the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, or places just where interpreters are not prevalent, we need to provide them more flexibility in those areas for them to have the ability to find interpreters within the areas to then provide interpreting services in schools. And again, I understand the thoughts, not necessarily my own, but through feedback sessions and discussions with other individuals, that perspective. Now, if we are more strict with a provisional licensure, this could mean that school systems may have to then change the ways in which they operate. It might mean increasing interpreter compensation. It might mean getting deaf people to work in the school system. What are they willing to do to address the paucity of interpreters in their area? Sometimes we hear reports that they pay for interpreters in educational settings is not great, to say the least. Students deserve the best educational experience possible, hearing or deaf, and we need to make sure that they have access to that right through qualified interpreting services. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are not lowering the standards for interpreters within the educational system. We want to work on what those standards are for K-12 systems so that we have EIPA 3.7 at minimum, but also we need to figure out what range we would find acceptable to allow some flexibility.
If I may, this is Leslie speaking.
Mhm.
First of all, I'd like to say I agree with everything that Sue brought up last week and the discussions we have had up until this point regarding this topic. And it's important that we recognize the scarcity in terms of the number of interpreters and the potential impact that will have a ripple effect. Okay. I have several friends when, as the bill became law in states like Minnesota and in states like Pennsylvania and in Kentucky and places throughout the United States, who echo the fact that there were impacts and ramifications and struggles. And initially, there was definitely a shortage of interpreters, and people panicked because they didn't know where to acquire services. But over time, people realized that the law ultimately pushed interpreters to hone their craft. Right now, we have no minimum expectations. Some individual counties might have criteria in place, and that's wonderful. But what those criteria look like are not standardized in any way. So, from the Eastern Shore to Frederick County to PG County, it could vary greatly. And we honestly don't know. There might be some standardization, but probably some not. So, that being said, I think that the requirement would encourage working interpreters to continue to develop their craft and continue to improve. Not only educational K-12 interpreters, but all interpreters. This would serve as a push to them to really start to do some self-reflection and analysis of their own work, which everybody should be doing. No one knows it all yet. Nobody does. This is a forever learning type of field. So with that challenge, Sue also makes a great point about, how do I say, no, no access versus low quality access. And that's a difficult position to be in. We're between a rock and a hard place, and I understand that. That, and as Jacob mentioned, and I know very beginning in the open comment, there was talk about when we removed the bachelor's degree requirement, many interpreters, educational interpreters, were upset because the school systems don't view them as a quote unquote professional because of that, and therefore they can't justify higher compensation. Well, maybe now when the school system sees the pool of working interpreters drastically decrease due to these ramifications, you know, they might be, still qualified, but the board is going to set that minimum qualification level of a 3.7. So maybe that will be a wake-up call to the school systems that in order to recruit the folks that they need to be able to satisfy the language of the law, they're going to have to increase compensation and take other steps. Okay. We were all in agreement about those current interpreters who are working, making sure that we encourage them while ensuring that our students have as much access, educational access, as possible. And that kind of goes back to something Sue mentioned, I think about the beginning of the summer when it came to access, when we were trying to figure out what our magic number would be. And I believe the breakdown was a 3.6 was equal to, or 3.0 was equal to, or 3.5, excuse me, was equal to about 60% access. So wherever we fall on that scale, it's never going to be equivalent. Okay. This is not an assessment of interpreting skill, but that access percentage is a difficult thing to have to swallow and have to live with. So first, I want to clarify. I want nothing but top tier interpreters for our students in the school system. Deaf kids deserve that. There is no question. However, at the same time, there's a real concern about access for those students in the immediacy. Some access versus no access. No access feels like harm is being done for these deaf and hard of hearing children. So I think we need to figure out a balance of providing access, especially in those aforementioned rural areas. Because even if we make a decision that in the educational setting, they could maybe work with a licensed interpreter. As I mentioned before, on the Eastern Shore, we have 5 certified interpreters. Okay, that's all the way to the Bay Bridge. 5. And I believe that encompasses 5 or 6 counties. So 5 certified interpreters, think about that. So if we make that a requirement, and I'll be completely honest, it feels like an impossible task. Because while we want the best, obviously, for our deaf and hard of hearing children, because those are our future leaders within the community, it really starts at birth, right? So we want top tier interpreters and top tier language models. But if we are to draw a hard line and those interpreters leave the field and leave our children with nothing and leave the school systems with nothing, because I'll be honest with you, the school systems, how do I say? It's not an attractive, many interpreters, not all, but many interpreters prefer freelance and community interpreting. Working in a school system is not always attractive from an interpreter's perspective. There are some who do enjoy that setting, that do enjoy K-12 life, and I don't want to bar them from the ability to work in the school system. In addition to that, there are already competent interpreters working there now, but they might not necessarily hold a formal credential. I honestly don't know the stats. I'm not there to observe their skills on a day-to-day, but I am sure, I know some of them themselves have deaf parents or deaf siblings and are fluent signers, but might not yet have a credential like a certification. So how can we provide opportunities for them? Again, in a school system as well. That's the big question.
Vice Chair?
Great point about those totals and those numbers of certified folks. I'm a part of a Facebook group about testing, okay? And it tracks from when you test to when you receive your score. And we're averaging about a 3-month time frame now for the performance for the CASLI. So I think that's very positive, meaning that falls within our grace period. And if people do feel competent within their skill and within their ready, I think they can move forward with that 3 month turnaround in place, which means if I do some quick math, I'm counting, I'm doing math. I'm thinking, all right, 9 to 10 months, something like that, complete turnaround. It's been a long day, but certainly it's less than a year. So it's relatively easy to schedule both the ethics and the performance. So that at least is one positive.
Thanks, Chair Leffler. For the written ethics portion, when people take that, are they typically notified within 2 weeks if they passed or not? Is it same day, 2 weeks? What's that time frame? And then secondly, how soon after that are they able to take the performance exam? Do they need to wait a month, 2 or 3?
Okay. So for the first part, I can answer. For the second part, we'd have to look it up. So for the knowledge and ethical tests, which you take simultaneously, the knowledge is about a 1 to 2 day turnaround, and then 1 to 2 weeks to get the response. And it's not necessary, so it's not a pass fail. It's pass fail. Like, so for example, a person could pass the knowledge part, but then fail the ethical part. They're graded separately. So in that case, they would not have passed the knowledge and ethical exam, and they would not be able to take the performance until they pass the ethical piece. And I would have to double check. It's been several months. I'm not sure exactly. I would have to look to find out exact timelines.
Okay. Yes, Member Beaver.
I took the written test. Now remember, this was a minute ago, 2008. Yeah, okay. I'll confirm. I'll agree with the interpreter on that interpretation. So it was 2008, and I took it in April, and I took the performance then that following August. So math is happening 4 months later. So at that time, I don't think they had a specific amount of time you had to wait before you took the performance after you're written. I don't know if that policy has changed.
So I do want to thank ODHH. They did a quick check, and it looks like from the research that there is no waiting period on from how far long after taking the ethics and written knowledge exam to when they can take that performance.
Okay, I don't see anything about the site that speaks to their timeline or their time frame.
Pardon me.
Bless you.
So I think it really is important for us to make some decisions tonight. I want to move this forward and move the regulations forward and get things buttoned up. So I guess the question we have to answer, and I know Vice Chair Puzo, you feel strongly from one perspective and Member Beaver from another. So I'm not necessarily merging the two, but I would like to figure out what we could do to find compromise between the two. And also considering the community comments that we've received. So a thought comes to mind. Are we okay with generally provisioned licensed interpreters being permitted in the educational setting if they are teamed with a licensed interpreter? Do you think that's a better solution, a compromise, or does the board feel that there's another compromise that they would like to propose that we might be able to vote on tonight and agree to?
If I may, this is Leslie speaking. I think it would be a good compromise. I know the struggle is going to be to the aforementioned point, finding that fully licensed interpreter to work alongside them. Also, when we're talking about formal mentorship and interns, to be able to work in the medical mental health setting with a licensed interpreter, I feel that that would then be fair because you would then have somebody to provide that direct oversight in the case that access is not happening or the message is not rendered faithfully. They would be able to be there to make those repairs in real time.
Sure. I would actually like to clarify a mentorship in this instance. So an individual that works within the community, they could be working asynchronously, but this would be a licensed individual.
I understand that, Chair. This was just an example. Somebody who is not yet fully qualified to take the performance test still would, again, work with a licensed individual. I know it's separate, but I'm saying it would be the equivalent and would be on parallel. Somebody not being fully certified or fully licensed, excuse me, meaning there would be somebody there to provide direct oversight of the process, either in those two mental health related settings and or education.
Member Beaver, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I agree that that is a good compromise. I still have a level of concern about the scarcity and the shortage of interpreters, particularly in those rural areas. That being said, we can add this, and then really it will be a wait and see for public comment on this section. Also, this kind of goes back to the board not being responsible for finding interpreters or finding those licensed interpreters. We are there to provide standards and to create those standards for the state for the purpose of licensure. That's our duty. So I think in this case, it's a fair compromise to say in the educational environment, in an educational setting, we allow them to work alongside a licensed interpreter for a provisional holding individual.
And this is the chair, Leffler. Really, we'd be working and committing to work with a qualified interpreter, keeping our standards high. Our job, like you said, is to develop those standards. And I'm searching for the specific word. I'm at a loss for words tonight. I apologize, but I had an illustrative example that I just can't remember. For interpreters who are working and looking at recruitment of interpreters, and that's not our job. That's not the responsibility or purview of the board. We as a board are responsible for developing the qualifications that interpreters within the state of Maryland must have in order to do their job, and then establishing those criteria within regulation. And the community, I would hope you would understand that for those individuals working in hospitals, courts, educational settings, school systems, or what have you, are out within the community, those individuals would also be then responsible for recruiting the interpreters. So that's the population of Maryland looking for interpreters that are responsible for it and not the purview of this board. Sue.
My apologies. Yes, I absolutely agree with the statement that was just made. I agree. I also want to add access to the board. I mean, the responsibility of the board is providing access. So, meaning quality interpreters or qualified interpreters. My concern is still with these changes at access. I mean, we can publish the regs and then wait and see how the public responds and
Mhm.
gather feedback from there.
We could do that, absolutely. Now, I do agree that we need to, again, solicit the public comments as per requirements for their feedback, but we also need to look at why do we have licensure? Why was it established?
Because of ongoing years and years of harm.
Absolutely. Harm to the deaf and hard of hearing community. And that harm is happening because of unqualified, unskilled interpreters that are then causing that harm. And there are some agencies as well that are responsible for the harm that is caused to the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind community. So the licensure is to hold interpreters accountable, to elevate the standards and hold them accountable to those, whether they're community members, children, etc., who are experiencing these services. It's to hold the interpreters accountable.
This is Leslie speaking. I want to circle back to, I want to say something that might have been mentioned about 3 weeks ago. It wasn't in last week's meeting, but I think it was the meeting prior to that. And I believe it was in reference, not MSDE, but Education Department. Okay. And the letter, thank you, thank
Yes,
you.
from the Board of
Their
Education.
letter, their
Yeah.
letter, and their recommendations that they outlined, so forth and so on. And again, we wanted to see if this was something, we unfortunately do not have any authority, but we did have a discussion about the recommendations for the school systems and how to, again, foster and encourage growth through professional development for those K-12 interpreters. And in addition to that, the responsibility of ODHH that's outlined in the law. GODHH has a responsibility to create and host a variety of professional development opportunities for those interpreters. So there are already built-in requirements that the state is asking for the Governor's Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing to be able to provide those professional development and training opportunities, not just for those marginalized communities, but also just general open sessions to provide training, not just about the knowledge and ethical exams, but also for that performance piece. Those tools are in the language of the law. And there was a strongly written response to that educational group saying these things are in place and ultimately we should be fostering the growth of our interpreters. And I think being a little bit more strong with our recommendations. And then I think the school systems, when they see the ultimate result and what happens in terms of interpreter numbers going down, they will have to respond.
This is Chair Leffler. Do you mind turning off your? Thank you. So yeah, Sue, did you want to make a comment?
No, that's a good point about the letter. I actually, suggested that years ago, something to that effect, writing something and sending something out to all of the school districts in the state of Maryland. I think we have a total of 24. So I started a spreadsheet with the names of all the superintendents, the directors, the heads, so forth and so on, so that something could be drafted in the form of a letter with recommendations. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay, so it seems like we are okay as a board with moving forward with provisional licensures. They're generally provisional licenses working in mental health and medical settings with the team who is licensed. And now for educational, they could work solo. If they have a general license, they would then need a licensed team. So that general license individual could work solo within the educational setting, but the provisional license would require that team. So we're essentially moving into the carved out area of law that allows them to work there. Education along with mental health and medical.
And I would like to ask our AAG Ethan with some help with the wordsmithing and the language for that piece.
Yes, and once we have some proposed language for that, he is able to help finesse that into an appropriate format. So does anybody want to make a motion?
We're going to rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so I, Leslie Puzio, move for the language in the general provisional licensure section to reflect provisional license interpreters will have the ability to work in medical and mental health and educational K-12 settings alongside a fully licensed interpreter.
And as well as other settings, correct?
Well, I think currently in the regs right now, it only provides restrictions, not allowances. So it only speaks to the restrictions.
Understood. So would you mind rephrasing that to say provisionally general licensed interpreters are allowed to work are not allowed to work in the legal settings, but can work within the medical, mental health, or behavioral health and educational settings with a licensed interpreter, and they can work in other settings alone. So again, that will allow our AG to understand what it is that the board's intentions are with that language and then help us to craft it correctly. And then so Vice Chair Puzio, if you wouldn't mind rephrasing.
Sure. General provision license interpreters can work in any setting with the exception of legal, medical, mental health, and educational alongside a licensed interpreter.
Is there a second?
Second, says Sue.
So I would guess that we don't need any more discussion on that. So if we could have a vote for a favor to allow generally provisional licensed interpreters work within any setting except for legal and to work within medical, behavioral health, and educational settings with a licensed interpreter as a team. Any votes in the affirmative? Seeing all, it passes. Now, I do want to add, with that motion, we do need to, again, look at the proposal for the entire regulations as they stand. So there will be some support from the AAG along with that motion to make sure that that language can be put in the regulations and posted for public comments for 30 days, along with all of the revisions. So if we could have our motion for that. Vice Chair Puzio.
This is Leslie. For clarification, with that motion, we also need to make sure it states something to the effect of with the Assistant Attorney General's edits. So it's not just approval of the regs as written, it's approval of the regs barring edits by the AAG.
Correct. Yes, as was motioned.
So this is Sue. I move that we approve the regulations with edits from the Assistant Attorney General and in the new motion, for the new motion. Second.
Okay. Seems like we don't need any further discussion on this regard. So all in favor, please raise your hands for the regulations as written with AAG edits and with the current and new proposal added. So hopefully that will pass because I saw everyone in unanimous consent on that. And we should have that done this week or next, have the regulations edited and sent for legal review and any of the legal review edits as required. And then we'll send them on to ODHH for the general open comment postings, etc. And they will, again, be looking for the community. Please, community, keep your eyes out as to when we have those posted so that you can provide your comments to us so that we can read through them, see the feedback that you have for us on the regards of the regulations. And feel free to meet with me or Vice Chair Puzio or Member Beaver at any point if you would like to have further in-depth discussions. We would love to hear from you, the entire community, on your feedback, thoughts, and considerations of the regulations that we have drafted. And speaking for myself and the board, I feel like these regulations have been a community effort. They have not been done in a silo by the board. This is something that everybody has really rolled up their sleeves to get through and to the finish line that we are seeing closely approaching. So thank you everybody for working with us as we have been on this journey. And this has been a monumentous effort by the community and the board. And I want to encourage everyone to please keep your eyes out for when that open comment period and that opportunity for your comments to be filed and heard by the board. We as a board will be available to see comments and have discussions with the community again during maybe a future business meeting that we have. And we will announce that again as we're closer to that time. So thank you all for your time. And we are really looking forward to this process continuing on its pathway. Sue or Leslie, I'd like to thank you for your time. And thank you to the Access team as well. Thank me.
Thank you, Jacob.
I don't know if I'm going to thank myself. That seems a little weird. But yes, thank you, Leslie. So I hope everybody has a great week. And we are adjourning at 7:40.